Hello and welcome to Motorcycle.com's review of the new 2017 KTM Super Adventure R. We are here in Paracas, Peru. Pretty spectacular scenery, really. Anyway, 1290 is a big bike for off-road use. And we're getting ready to start finding out what it's like.
So there's three new 1290s for 2017, or two new 1290s for 2017, three models. There's the 1290S, which is a pavement sport-oriented version of the Super Adventure. It's still a Super Adventure, so it's a little taller than, say, the Super Duke GT. It's got the Super Adventure motor instead of the Super Duke motor. Now that second model we mentioned is the 1290 Super Adventure T, also not here, but it is very, very close to last year's bike. It doesn't have the new headlight, has the same tuning, has the same, it's very, very close to last year's 2016 model. So that's called the Super Adventure T. We're not really here to talk about that bike today. We're here to talk about the 1290 Super Adventure R. This is the Super Adventure R. The Super Adventure R is replacing the 1190 Adventure R from last year. That means it's got 21-inch front wheel, 18-inch rear wheel. It's off-road oriented. It's got more suspension travel. It's got more off-road oriented tuning inside that suspension. It's got the large crash guard and bars. It is very much a far more serious off-roader than the regular Super Adventure that we knew from last year. It also has a much lower windscreen, and that was our biggest complaint about last year's 1290 when we were doing a kind of a sport adventure touring shootout with a lot of road work and a lot of high-speed stuff. It was buffeting our helmets, and when one of the morons, Evans Brassfield, crashed it, he broke the whole screen off, and we actually liked the bike better then. Look at this. This screen is perfect. No buffeting, gives you good airflow. It has adjustable height. Right now we've got it running low because, like I said, I'd prefer not to have a screen at all. And it's hiding behind it a very sleek new, completely new LCD display. So this is an all glass TFT. It's not plastic covered like the old ones. This is sort of like a Gorilla Glass type cell phone glass. So it's, you know, rocks aren't going to break it. It's not going to scratch when you wipe it off covered in dust. It's a better solution for off-road, believe it or not. You would think glass is counterintuitive, but I've seen what happens to plastic screens when you keep wiping them off in the middle of a long off-road ride, and I don't want that to happen to my expensive, you know, touring bike. Right below the new windscreen, we have an all-new headlight. It looks like it's bisected. It looks almost like two different lights. And the reason is that's a giant aluminum heatsink down the front. So it's all LED, and instead of having a giant heatsink behind it that's really heavy, it's integrated in the center structure of the light, and it bleeds off the heat forward with the wind blast coming over it when you're riding. So it's a pretty smart solution. They passed around the complete headlight unit last night during the tech presentation, and it's very thin and compact. I think it's a nice upgrade. That's only on the new 1290S and the 1290R. The T, like I said, is very close to last year's bike, so it has the old regular headlight. So what else is new? Well, so it's got the 1190R's same exact fuel tank from last year. It's got all new bodywork in front here. It's got new tank cover, new side cover. The side cover is a completely new design that actually integrates with the new intake track, which is new for 2017 on the R. And that intake track has a grill right here that's designed to accept an accessory pre-filter. So this isn't the primary filter. There's two snorkels on each side. It's the same, they look the same. The bike doesn't come with this pre-filter, but you buy the accessory, it bolts straight in. So we're out here in this fine, silty Peruvian sand, and it's exactly where you'd want something like a pre-filter. So good on KTM for that. Do you want a 1290 out here in this fine sand? Do you want a 1290 as an off-road bike? As we're starting to see with things like the Multistrada Enduro, a lot of people do want a 1290 because you still got to get places in the real world as well. It's awful nice to have on the road. Now let's talk about the big changes. We're looking at a new suspension for the 1290 this year. This is in the vein of last year's 1190R to go along with that 21-inch front and 18-inch rear wheel. We've got quite a bit more travel. We've got specific, more optimized for off-road damping. We've got remote adjustable preload, manually adjustable rebound and compression damping.
So instead of a slipper clutch, KTM's back torque limiting electronics, they're pretty neat. You can pretty much pop off downshifts at will. You know, you overcook something, you come into a corner. I'm holding back right now so I'm not so blinded by dust, but sometimes we get bunched up and you end up kind of misreading the trail because there's too much dust in front of you. And in those situations, every now and then you need to scrub off some speed real quick and pop off some downshifts because you're going to need immediate torque to get out up the other side. And in those situations, the 1290 is doing a really good job of acting invisible. Like there's not a mechanical slipper clutch, but the engine understands the chop throttle and the downshifts and carries just a little bit of throttle while you're decelerating to prevent, on a super low mu as they call it, which is, you know, the symbol for friction or traction. Basically it means on a really low traction surface, that deceleration may not be enough to activate or to invoke the plate separation in a mechanical slipper clutch, meaning you may have so little traction at the rear that you can't generate enough back torque to spread the plates and disengage the clutch. So with this system, it doesn't really matter what you're on. It can read it. It doesn't need any physical force. It just needs to see the wheel speed sensor. So in the very low traction or really slippery, you know, talcum on top of rock kind of situation, it reads it correctly and adjusts, so you just never get that nasty chatter. You know, you never hop the rear tire into a corner because you're at gear too low now and still going a little too fast. So it does a great job. That's not to say you could drop it in first and let the clutch out at 70 miles an hour, because you're still dealing with an engine. And since there's not a mechanical separation or whatever, you're gonna over rev that thing. And when you're paying for your own motorcycle, you probably don't want to be over revving it on the downshift on the regular.
The bike actually has a completely retuned software suite. It's got the same basic electronic hardware as it had last year, but the software profiles are specific to the R model, including a completely separate ride mode that doesn't exist on the other models, and that is off-road ride mode. That gives you the off-road ABS with no rear brake ABS and much more liberal front brake ABS that allows quite a bit more front tire slide before it engages to make it not intrusive in an off-road setting. So that's a great thing. Those electronics are just as important as having that extra travel and those correct sized off-road wheels and tires.
It's a nice thing about the ABS and the traction control on this. It is linked front to rear in normal mode, but as soon as you get into off-road mode, all the linking goes away. And in off-road mode, it still retains a little bit of traction control, but it allows wheel spin so that you can steer it like we just did there when we merged with this. You just give it a little wicket here. As you can see, it's sort of just, I mean, we got some uneven ground here, so it oscillates, but it just hangs it out. I wasn't using my right wrist for that, which is kind of unnatural for me. It's kind of hard not to modulate, but that was just whacking it and holding it. And the traction control does a pretty good job of letting it steer the bike without feeling like it's interrupting. It just doesn't let it get all the way out there. So pretty neat. Maybe a tiny bit unnatural, but if you're not paying attention, you'd never notice it. You would just be surprised by how little trouble you're having getting the thing sideways and holding it there.
Now let's talk about KTM's accessories. So this bike is a stock motored, stock bodywork 1290 Super Adventure R for 2017, but it is fitted with 3 accessories that I can see right now, 4 accessories I can see right now actually. We've got an Akrapovic exhaust. Now that has a quiet insert that's not much louder than stock. That is of course removable illegally to make it a little more throaty. It also has off-road pegs. So the stock bike's pegs are a little shorter, a little narrower, and they have a removable rubber insert in the middle. These are like a full bear trap, large platform, hardcore rally peg. So that's a nice upgrade. They put that on these bikes because we are doing some fairly serious off-roading on this intro. The third accessory item is that's an upgraded skid plate from the stock one. That is an accessory catalog skid plate. I would recommend if you're going to take your bike off-road, particularly someplace where there's rocks or a whole lot of elevation changes where you might be casing the thing, I'd spring for the aftermarket skid plate for sure. And finally up front here, as I mentioned before, we've got the pre-filter set for this bike. So you've got the new screen, which is extremely easy to read. You can see how blown out it is out here, right? It's really bright, really white light with a lot of potential for glare. I didn't pick up any glare off the screen. The coatings, the anti-glare coating they're using is working really well. And even though it's a TFT display, it's totally readable direct sunlight. It's doing a really good job. I'm pretty impressed with that. Also a nice electronic upgrade for 2017. KTM has improved the handlebar mounted switchgear. The buttons on it are now backlit. Before they were just plastic buttons with pictograms on them. They've moved the cruise control over to the left grip and freed up a little room on the right side. And the menu settings inside the LCD are much easier to scroll through and select from. I first noticed it on the Super Duke R. It could be a little tricky to get to where you wanted to go in the menus, and it's become a little more intuitive now, a little easier to scroll through. So far, I've had no complaints with its off-road performance. We've gone through deep sand, we've done some fairly steep off-camber side hill stuff. We're riding these like off-road dirt bikes. We're not riding them like big heavy touring bikes. We're doing our amateur impersonations of the Dakar Rally today, and the bike's doing just fine. You know, it is a big bike. There's a lot of inertia there, and there's no masking that. But compared to, like, say, last year's Super Adventure, the tank is narrower, the front of the bike is a little narrower. It's still a fairly wide front end, but it feels much closer to last year's 1190R, which I think all of us really preferred compared to the 1290, except when we were on the highway in top gear going in a straight line. So I think that's a really nice change, and so far, my initial impression is I think I probably would like to have the 1290R over the 1190R, and that's high praise. The 1190R smoked our adventure touring shootout last summer, about 6 months ago. This feels like a real noticeable improvement to me, and it bears well. I can't wait to ride it back to back with the Multistrada Enduro. I think they're both aimed squarely at the same audience. The KTM is already going to be maybe a little more capable off-road, but we got to get them head-to-head, back-to-back to find that out for sure. So let's get back to riding, and hopefully we'll have a fun second half of the day, and I'll be conscious by the end of it and able to fill you in on some more technical advanced riding that's going to happen and how the bike performed there.
It's doing a really good job of keeping me comfortable. The ergonomics are roomy, but not so gargantuan feeling, so wide between the knees as last year's Super Adventure felt. Even though it's the same frame and engine, unchanged from last year's Super Adventure, minus the crash guard, obviously. They did a great job with the bodywork of making it much more atmosphere-wise. Like sitting here looking right now at this ergonomic triangle, right? It does not look like the giant behemoth that last year's 1290 Super Adventure looked. It looks a lot more like last year's 1190 Super Adventure R, which is what KTM wants. Like they're replacing that bike with this bike, and they realized that the big touring-oriented bike that they had last year on the 1290 side wouldn't cut it. So even though this is in fact a 1290 and shares the same engine and frame as last year's bike, it looks smaller when you're riding it, and it feels a little smaller between your legs. and a little more manageable. I'm sure it carries less weight up high with this R fairing compared to the more full coverage touring fairing that's on the regular Super Adventure. So I'm giving that a thumbs up. Even on the street going fast, since I don't like giant windscreens, I would much prefer to be riding the R than last year's bike. And out here, pretending like we're in the Dakar, yeah, I'll take this, thank you very much. Who says a 1290 is not a good motor for off-road? Here we go. Bring that front end right up, no problem at all. Good fun and super smooth. The fueling is really nice. It's geared a little too tall, you know. If you were going to be serious off-road guy with this thing, you'd want to go up a couple teeth on the rear sprocket. So as it is, when we're crawling around, no, I'm not going to make that. When we're crawling around, like just off idle, there's some deep sand for you. More deep sand. So when you're crawling around just off idle, it's actually pretty easy to stall it. It's not geared for 2 miles an hour, you know. Unlike a GS, where GS is first gear, you can crawl that thing around like a low-speed Jeep. So on this, what you need is good response off the bottom, clean fueling, and then you ride around in these tall gears. Look, I'm at 2,400 RPM. Now, don't get me wrong, I shouldn't be, but I'm narrating, so I'm trying to keep it quiet. Trying to keep the wind noise down. The nice thing about having this giant motor is, even with the tall gearing that works great for real-world pavement riding, it's just got so much low RPM torque that, yeah, it's not geared ideally, but it'll pull right through that tall first gear. Now, if you have the throttle closed, if you're just trying to idle out with the clutch or whatever, that's where it'll stall. You definitely need to have a little bit of throttle on. Good fun in Peru. On a remarkably comfortable motorcycle, roomy. This would be one hell of a good touring bike, particularly if you don't like giant windscreens. I would pick this one. I can't think of anything where I would pick the standard Super Adventure, or now in 2017 they call it the Super Adventure T. I can't think of any scenario where I would pick that bike over this bike, because I like small windscreens and much prefer the more dirt bike oriented feel of this bike. And if it's as good on-road as the 21-inch tired 1190 Adventure R is, I'm gonna guess it's going to be a heck of a good sport tourer in the traditional non-dirt sense too. It's basically reverse traction control, what KTM uses to, instead of a slipper clutch. And it's nice to be able to just tap dance on the lever. No drama at all, no funky chattering, no nastiness. Oh, it's pretty nice when you just whack it open, shift up to third gear, and the front end just comes up nice and gentle and smooth like that. Pure power wheelie, wasn't trying to wheelie. Nice and predictable. It's things like that where you know this is going to be a super, super fun bike to ride on a canyon road. If you look to the right, we're going to be riding through that. Now, we're not using paddle tires or dune tires. We're using TKC 80s at full street pressures because there was a lot of rocks back a ways back on another part of the route, and they were getting punctures. So they have these tires aired up, and there's more rocks down the road, and they want to leave them aired up. I'm going to give it a shot, and if my memory card holds out, you'll get to see the suffering that's going to ensue. Yeah, I didn't think you could do this on this big giant bike, but you can. We are in deep, deep powder, and we are doing it. Oh, we're swapping a little bit. Gonna drop off a fucking cliff! Hope that looked good on video. It sure hurt. Oh, fuck. Gonna drop off a fucking cliff! This is how deep the sand is. You can see it here. My left shin hurts. I did go over the bars. I think I can continue the ride though. The rest of the guys didn't come up here. So, needless to say, that little pain I felt in my leg was more than we expected. Luckily, nothing's broken. Turns out that I've got some soft tissue crush damage from when I went over the bar. My left shin hit the bar, and so my leg's twice the size it should be. It's already too big to start with, so you know, what are you gonna do? Anyway, the bike was fine. I did ride it back down with the rest of the group, and I continued on for about 25, 30 kilometers more after that. So I'm basically physically fine. I've got some soft tissue damage. It's gonna take some anti-inflammatories for about 3 weeks, and there's a little bit of skin damage. But it's no big deal, everything's good. We did, you know, 95% of the ride or 90% of the ride yesterday, so we didn't miss anything. That's it. It's a weird way to end a ride video, but it's the truth. We're sitting here in Lima Airport waiting to fly back to LA, you know, it's another great Mo adventure, right? So, final thoughts on the bike. We've got an MSRP now. It's $17,999. That puts it about $3,300 below the base price of the Multistrada Enduro. I would say, best case, those two bikes are probably on par. So at $17,999, it looks like KTM's going to have a pretty, Ducati's going to have a pretty tough time beating KTM. As soon as we can get those two bikes together back home, we'll go ahead and find out how they do stack up. It should be a good one, but that's a pretty good price for as much motorcycle as you're getting with the new 1290 Super Adventure R. Read the whole story on Motorcycle.com. Comment on Facebook, comment on Mo, comment here on YouTube. Click the button to subscribe. We love you guys. Come join us. Let's ride together. That's it.
My group over here.
Welcome to sunny Paracas, Venezuela. Never mind, we have to cut that one. Am I close?